You know, there's two aspects of American culture that I really subscribe to. The first, P.T. Barnum, there's a sucker born every minute. And the fact is, the Americans will commercialize anything for Christmas or Halloween sales or gain. Now, this request is from 80 Sabres fan who wanted me to do something on this, but I think she's looking at the what they call the fun or Hollywood aspect of it. To dress up like this character. She said she's considering doing this for next year. But this guy back in the day, or this category, wasn't anything to do with positivity. If anything, it was death and trying to stop more death. They're called plague doctors. Now, the plague doctor has a very unique look as seen in his artwork on the channel. The plague doctor was a physician who treated victims of various aspects of the bubonic plague during the epidemics, mainly in the 16th and 17th century, that killed told millions of people across the globe. These physicians were hired by cities to treat infected patients, regardless of income, especially the poor that could not afford to pay. Now, plague doctors had a mixed reputation, with some of them seeing their presence as a warning to leave the area or that death was near. Now, some plague doctors were said to charge patients and their families additional fees for special treatments or false cures. In many cases, these doctors were not experienced physicians or surgeons, instead being volunteers, second-rate doctors, or young doctors just starting a career. In one case, a plague doctor was a fruit salesman before his employment as a physician. Plague doctors rarely cured patients, instead serving to record death tolls and a number of infected people for census or democratic purposes. But again, a very dramatic look with the long robe and like the bird type, what do you call it, protective helmet. Now, in France and the Netherlands, plague doctors often lack medical training and were referred to as empirics. Plague doctors were known as municipal or community plague doctors, whereas general practitioners were separate doctors, and both might be in the same European city or town at the same time. Now, according to Michael Thibaulanc's Encyclopedia of Infectious Diseases, yes, that's a book. The first mention of the iconic plague doctors found during the 1619 plague outbreak in Paris in a written work of royal physician Charles Lomé, serving King Louis XIII of France at the time. After Delorme, German engraver Gerhard Alsenbach published a famous illustration in 1656, which publisher Paulus Fauss iconic Dr. Schleibel von Rome is based upon. And this satirical work first describes how the doctor does nothing but terrify people and take money from the dead and dying. Now, the city of Variato hired Matteo Furangelo in 1348 for 4 times the normal rate of the doctor of the high pay of 50 florin per year. Pope Clement VI hired extra plague doctors during the Black Death Plague to tend to the sick people at Avignon. Of 18 doctors in Venice, only 1 was left by 1348. 5 had died of the plague, and 12 were missing and may have fled away. The need for elaborate costume came from the belief that the bubonic plague was transmitted through miasma poison air, which was a theory that Hippocrates and Galen long had before the plague. Now, plague doctors practice bloodletting and other remedies such as putting frogs or leeches on said areas of the body to rebalance the humors. A plague doctor's principal task, besides treating people with the plague, was to complete public records of plague deaths. Now, in certain European cities like Florence and Perugia, plague doctors were requested to do autopsies to help determine the cause of death and how the plague affected the people. Plague doctors also sometimes took patients' last will and testament during times of epidemics and gave advice to their patients about their conduct before death. This advice varied depending on the patient, and after the Middle Ages, the nature of the relationship between doctor and patient was governed by the increasingly complex ethical code. Now, some plague doctors wore a special costume consisting of an ankle-length overcoat and a bird-like beak mask, often filled with sweet or strong-smelling substance, commonly lavender, along with gloves, boots, a white-brimmed hat, a linen hood, and an outer over-clothing garment. However, the costume was not worn by all medieval and early modern physicians studying and treating plague patients. The exact origins of the costume are unclear, however, they have been dated back to Italy and France. Most depictions come from the satirical drawings and political cartoons. The beak plague doctor inspired costumes in Italian theater as a symbol of general horror and death, though some historians insist that the plague doctor was originally fictional and inspired the real plague doctors later. Now, depictions of the beaked A plague doctor rose in response to superstition and fear about the unknown source of the plague. Often, these plague doctors were the last thing a patient would see before death. Therefore, the doctors were seen as a foreboding of death. It appears that only contemporary sources which claim witness to this infamous costume are based in Italy during the second half of the 17th century. Later sources based in other areas do claim that this costume, while in use in their country, most specifically during the Black Death, it is possible that they were being influenced by theater and other works of fiction already cited in this presentation. Now, the typical mask had glass openings for the eyes and a curved leather beak, shaped like a bird's beak with straps that held the beak in front of the doctor's nose. The mask had 2 small nose holes and was type a respirator, which contained aromatic items. The first known observation of the herbal stuffed beak was from an epidemic in Rome in 1656. The beak could have whole dried flowers like roses and carnations, herbs like lavender and peppermint, camphor or a vinegar sponge, as well as juniper berry, ambergris, cloves, lagdium, myrrh, and storax. The herbs right up against the nose inside the beak allowed for the doctor to have both of their hands free in order to examine the patient of corpse, because obviously the corpse is throwing off quite an odor. The purpose of the mask, again, was to keep away bad smells, such as decaying bodies, and the smell taken with the most caution was known as misama, or the poisonous air, which was thought to be the principal cause of the disease. Doctors believed the herbs would counter the evil smells of the plague and prevent them from becoming infected. Now, the wide-brimmed leather hat indicated their profession. They used wooden canes in order to point out areas of the contention and to examine patients without touching them. The canes were also used to keep people away and to remove clothing from plague victims without having to touch them. The doctor's long robe was made from linen because it was said germs did not stick to linen as easily as other materials. The robe was also sometimes made from goatskin, which was said to be stronger against the plague than linen because of its small pores and polished texture. It was heard of for the robe to be sealed with oil or wax for an extra layer of protection so that the poison air could not seep through the holes of the linen material. The costume of the plague doctor is one of the first examples we have of the modern hazmat suit. Now, the well-known costume now is used as a common costume in festivals mainly in Europe and win the air of theater. Now, a plague doctor's contract was an agreement between the town's administrator and a doctor to treat bubonic plague patients. These contracts are present in various European city archives. Their contractual responsibility was to treat plague patients and no other type of patient to prevent spreading the disease to the uninfected. A plague doctor had to serve a long quarantine after seeing a plague patient. The doctor was regarded as a contact who by agreement had to live in isolation to be quarantined. Now, the bargaining, which was also preceding the final contract, various times consisted of serious negotiations for obvious reasons. Who wants to be near death but not get paid for it? For example, the town's administrators of Turin in 1630 were considering the terms of an agreement requested by one Dr. Melito to become their first plague doctor. After much negotiation, they instructed their broker representatives to make a fair and prompt deal as soon as possible with this Dr. Melito. They were told to get the best possible deal for the city, but to be careful not to lose the opportunity of hiring this plague doctor, as it would be difficult to find someone else to perform these dangerous duties at such a low rate. Now, plague doctors through the years have dated from the late 1500s all the way up to not say modern day, but close enough. The Italian city of Pavia in 1479 contracted Giovanni de Ventura, great name Ventura, to walk around, as a community plague doctor. The Irish physician Nialo Glasson earned deep respect in Spain, France, and Italy for a number of years, almost 50, for his bravery in treating numerous people with the plague. Now, the French antagonist Ambroise Paré and Swiss iatrochemist Paracelsus were also famous Renaissance plague doctors. Now, Nostradamus, of all people, gave advice about preventative measures against the plague, such as removal of infected corpses, getting fresh air, drinking clean water, and drinking a juice preparation of rose hips. In Théâtre de Fadama, Part A, Chapter 8, Nostradamus also recommended do not bleed the patient. Now, John Pultius was Edinburgh's first plague doctor, but he died in June 1645, only weeks after starting his job. He was succeeded by George Ray. Now, various texts talk about the various plague doctors and their accoutrements. And there's a very interesting article by Jackie Rosencheck. It's called Doctor of the Black Death, the Doctor's Review, published in 2014, and also various publications, including Yale, and a very interesting book, Encyclopedia of Infectious Diseases, came out last time, I think in 2007. So again, Sabres fan, the 1980 Sabres fan, does request this for you, but it's also always good to learn the history of any type of costume. Obviously, there's a connection with horror and fear with this, but it's sort of unique character. Why in the name of God would any plague doctor have to dress up like a bird, where he could use like a bellows or some type of super mask, to go at it? I think it was just basically part of the Middle Ages into the 17th, 18th century. A lot of this thing was for show, and wanted to stand out. But what would the people be paid, and how would he be paid? Because if the plague was going through a certain area, the guy that was paying you could be dead when you got back. So there's a lot of fuzziness about this. But the thing, we have the recognition in the stage information and in the public that these people did exist, or dress like this, or dress like this in their job. There's too many anecdotes. But like I said, if I saw a plague doctor coming to my house, I'm going to meet him with a shotgun at the end of the road to get the hell away from my land, because if they're coming, they might have the plague to begin with. We don't know. So, but millions and millions of people died from the plague back in the day. You think COVID is freaky? My God, ladies and gentlemen, blame the rats and the the various ports of call, and all kind of different stuff. So that's our latest podcast and some of the history of the varied history of what he called horror or horrorful moments in history. Let us know what you think with our wide-ranging podcast. We'll like, comment, subscribe, or share. Again, happy Christmas to Sabres fan and all the great followers of the channel. We really appreciate your efforts. If it's the first time you're hearing about Play Doctor, like I said, welcome to the camp. We're all glad that you're here. Thanks for listening. Bye.